Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to the opening ceremony of the town's 250th anniversary celebration. Before we begin, before the program of the opening ceremony begins, I have a couple of announcements I'd like to make. Please listen. School and COVID protocols are requiring all those in the audience and when you are in the hall to wear a mask. The state protocol for on stage does not require people on stage to wear a mask. So if you are wondering why we up here are not wearing them, and you are, we're following the state guidelines for stage and audience. The program also has in it thank yous, but as it always happens, there are always people who contribute before or after the program has been officially done, and I'd like to give a shout out to some of those people. First of all, Nolly's Restaurant on Main Street provided the cast and crew here the afternoon's lunch, and we are very thankful for that. Most people got here about noon. They have been here working constantly. There are some of us who have been here since 10 o'clock in the morning, and so the lunch that they provided was indeed very helpful to us. There are two special Gilbert students that I would like to acknowledge. Both were here at 10 o'clock this morning. Their names are not in the program, but without their assistance in setting up the staging and the lights and the microphone, you wouldn't hear us. It would be quiet. But they are here, and they're working in the back. Carla Medor, who's a senior at Gilbert and is going on to a career in theater, and a college career in theater, and Ellis Zhang, who is a sophomore and will be doing a lot of the taking over for Carla after she graduates. Additionally, in the program, you will notice that we have thanked the Soldiers Monument Commission members who have contributed tremendously to making sure this production could go on. But special thanks to Commission member Thomas Sullivan. Thomas came here this morning and provided the technical director, Cash Pack, with additional help. We went through a couple of iterations, and with Thomas's help with Cash, we are now able to present to you what we think is a fairly organized program. We're doing as best as possible. Everybody that you see on stage is a volunteer, and everybody who is volunteering is, that you will see saying their parts, decided how they were going to do it. The scripts were not written by me, they were developed by them. There is a great deal of individuality here, and a great deal of creativity. This production would not have been able to go on at all without their assistance and their volunteering. It took a great deal of their own research to do it. So we will begin tonight, and with those announcements done, I guess you know where the exits are, this way. Anybody need a restroom facility at their end of the, go down to when you go out this door, go down to your right as far as you can, and you'll see restrooms down at that area. We are being live streamed tonight, and therefore it will be available in the future on the school's YouTube channel, TGSTV. So if you didn't hear everything tonight, you want to watch it some other night, please join us in doing that. As you saw outside, we have books, and I hope that we've entertained you enough tonight and excite you enough tonight that you say, I need to read some more about that history of, and there are several books out there you can pick up and enjoy. So we're going to begin tonight with the opening ceremony of the Winchester 250th anniversary, And I would like to welcome the chairperson of the committee that has been working over the last 2 years planning this, the chairman of that 250th anniversary committee. Please welcome Candy Perez.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see so many people here. I know we're going to have a really good night, and the play is going to not only be informative, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun, too. As you know, 250 years is an important milestone for just about everybody. So much has come and gone in our community since that time, but there's always one thing that I felt has been a constant, is that everybody always pulls together in the community. No matter what it is, people are always there for each other. And that is something from when we started till now, and will probably go on forever. Our early history, as we'll learn tonight, and some of you know from the books and whatnot, is that our community has had an impact at the state and national levels with the inventions that we've had, the manufacturing that we've had, and the leaders that we've had. And we have families, and some of you are in the audience tonight, that have direct lineage right to the people that founded this community 250 years ago. A little bit of perspective, the United States will not be celebrating our 250th anniversary until 2026. So Winchester was there first. They should have made us the capital. As you know, these things don't come together by themselves. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that do everything. And there's been a committee. We did a lot of it. We started off in person, then, as you know, with the pandemic, we Zoomed a lot, which I think saved some people miles, but we did miss putting things together. And that was one of the hardest things because, our birthday is May 21st from 1771, and we had this whole thing planned up in Winchester Center for that day, but now we're not. And instead, that's going to become the closing ceremony this coming May 21st, which is now better. It's a Saturday night with a dance. We'll do things on the green, and we'll get all of that going. Other things have rolled out slowly, but there's still recognition when you look around. We had community partners at Whiting Mills. They were the first ones to put up a 250th banner. True Value Hardware put up some signs, pictures within their store, and they also were helping sell some of the books. Nutmeg Potters recently did their window celebrating our 250th. The Elks Fishing Derby honored it. The Fire Department annual parade. Of course, there's Long Lake Lager at the Little Red Barn for the 250th. EDC had a storefront contest and incorporated that. On May 24th, our state representative had our 250th recognized at the state capitol. Our logo was created by two Gilbert students, Chloe Englace and Ileana Martinez, that you'll see on some of our things. The book, Founding to Flood, was written by Virginia Schultz-Charette, and you could get a copy of it outside, but I know that a lot of people have already bought that and has a lot of good history in it. We had a mural coordinated by Lara Green-Kozlowskis, who wanted to make sure that we had something that people could see. Next year, the Laurel Parade and the Pet Parade are going to combine, and they're going to be a large 250th celebration. The Winchester Grange, this summer, they incorporated a 250th theme, and they had the little pet parade because we couldn't have the real one in person. One of the people we really need to thank a lot for all of our banners and signs on the historical side, on the church, on the poles downtown is Candace Bouchard, and I know she's here somewhere. She really put those together for us and made that big visual throughout town. This winter, we hope the Gator Parade incorporates the 250th and other little things as we go along. We'll continue the celebration of 250 years because it's 250 years. So we want to also take a moment to thank our Northwest Community Bank, who made a large donation for this evening's play to help with all the costs that were associated with it. So Northwest Community Bank, we really appreciate their help. And last but not least is this play is the brainchild of the Soldiers Monument Committee to commemorate history and also to bring it to you, similar to their cemetery walk. So the Soldiers Monument Commission, led by Jack Bork on this, is really responsible for tonight's play, and we really appreciate everything they do on a yearly basis, but especially for tonight. We have a few speakers to open up our ceremony, and I'd like to introduce them now. I'd like to start with the Reverend Jacqueline Hall from the Winchester Congregational Church to say a few words. Come on up.
Good evening, town of Winchester. Hi, I'm the Reverend Jacqueline Hall, and I bring you greetings from the members and friends of the Winchester Center Congregational Church, just 5 miles up the hill on 263. But before I bless our time together, I wondered, did you know that if the town of Winchester is having a 250th birthday, that the Winchester Center Congregational Church is having that same 250th birthday? Before 1818, before you could become a town here in this Connecticut, you had to have an ecclesiastical society, which is a fancy word for congregational church. And that congregational church had to have an ordained Orthodox pastor that came along with it. And so you needed that to establish the town. And so we were there up on the top of the hill. And in the early years, these ecclesiastical societies were often responsible not just for worship, but for education and for civic things and even the dog pound and training the militia. That's why you find so many congregational churches have a green in front of them. And the societies were supported by the town's taxes, and everyone, and I wish it was still this way, had to come to church on Sunday. But that's why our buildings are not really called churches, they're called meeting houses, because they were not just religious buildings, they were community centers. So it all began up on the hill with land that was given to taxpayers of Hartford and Windsor. And it has been farmed, I'm told. I saw the hay bales today. It's been farmed from the beginning. I'm told it's been very hard up there because the land is full of rocks, and we also have a very high water table, so it's kind of marshy. And but we've had dairy farming for the last 150 years, and then we had sheep farming before that. And the center was just a bustling place up until probably a little bit after the Civil War, because then the Industrial Revolution came and everything moved down here where there were factories and you had the water power from the river. But up there on the hill, we had a general store and still have a post office and the Grange, several businesses, several schoolhouses, and the Little Red Schoolhouse, I need to put a plug in for them. They're on Platt Road, and that house has been painstakingly put back together, restored, and it's beautiful. And you can tour it on special days. And actually, one of the homes on the green used to be a tavern. There was a private school up there until the 50s. But what's most exciting for me that I learned is that the Underground Railroad ran right through Winchester Center. And many of our older homes have rooms and places where people were hidden on their way to freedom. So I urge you all to come up and visit us sometime. Sunday morning, I'd love to see you. But you're welcome to come. There'll be, as Candy said, there's going to be a dance in May at the Grange, and watch your fall calendar, because hopefully we'll be able to revive Winchester Center Days again, and that's usually at the end of September. So now at this moment, I ask you to pray with me in whichever way you're most comfortable. Awesome Creator, you've blessed our town for over 250 years. We've seen abundance and hardship, recovered from natural disaster and troubles of our own making, but you've always been here with us. Gracious being, now as we head into our time of postponed celebration and into our future, we ask that you make this town feel like home. May it be a place where everyone knows that they are welcomed as a part of the community and are able to welcome others as they visit or come here to live. Let this be a place where respect is the way of relating to each other, where kindness and consideration are usual. Let this be a place where all people, young and old, can grow and learn. May our town be a safe place physically and socially. May we be able to walk our town at any hour without fear and live in our town without ever feeling threatened. Bless our town leaders with wisdom for the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead. May our town express gratitude abundantly. May joy overflow here. May this town be a place where people listen and people know that they are heard. May understanding be real in this town, and may it be a place where the truth is always spoken, never with malice, but spoken in love. And may this town be a place of contentment for all its residents, where everyone has what they need. So bless this town, we pray. Keep it safe night and day from storms and unrest and from winds of outrageous fortune. May it be a place of shelter and each home a resting place where the doors are open wide for neighbors and the windows a place to view creation in all its splendor. Bless our play tonight and all the anniversary activities coming this year. Bless each of our town buildings, businesses, and homes, and guard each person in them. But most of all, bless us, all of us, and may we all live in peace. Amen.
And now I'd like to introduce our town historian, Mrs. Millie Hudak.
I'm going to keep this brief because I know you didn't come here to listen to me. You perhaps don't know this, but there's the oldest military organization in continuous existence is celebrating their 250th anniversary this year. And that's our very own Governor's Foot Guard of Connecticut. And some of you may not enjoy history, but history is not for us to like or dislike. History is for us to learn from. Winchester, the old society, came to life in 1750 when Caleb Beach landed up there and built his log cabin. It was 10 years later that David Austin found his way down through the Dugway and built his cabin at the head of the lake. The center of Winston at that time was a huge swamp that could not be penetrated from Chestnut Street beyond the YMCA. It wasn't until the Greenwoods Turnpike and the railroad came into town that the river then was dredged and our main street existed. Throughout the years, we all know Winsted has had fires, floods, a cyclone, a bank robbery, but Winsted has always recovered. Winsted continues to move forward. We have a college, we have new merchants on Main Street, we have a state-of-the-art medical facility on South Main Street, and soon to be a beautiful new Mary P. Hinsdale School. And all this doesn't happen without the dedication of our town officials and the volunteers who sit on the commissions and boards within this town. We're happy to have the Friends of Main Street, who do many, many tasks in town, and you probably don't even know they exist. I encourage all of you to get involved in town. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. If you have time, the town could use you. That's all you have to do is volunteer. 1 hour, 2 hours a week. Be part of the town. Be part of what it's doing. I encourage everyone also to visit the Historical Society. It's supposed to be, open now, but it's a little bit too cool up there. But you go up there, you'll learn exactly what they're going to portray tonight, what built this town, and what makes it a great place for you and I to live in. I'm going to close because I know you don't want to hear any more from me. Enjoy your evening, everyone, and enjoy being a resident of Winsted.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce our state representative, Jay Case.
Come on over, Candy. So it's great to be here tonight in the 250th anniversary. As Candy mentioned, we celebrated it at the House Capitol on the 24th. There wasn't any public allowed in the building, so it was just us boring legislators that were there. But as I look at this 250th logo here, that's the exact photo I have in my front room. It's quite large, but it was in Dr. Case's office, so it might be an original, I don't know, but I love that photo. Candy and I can probably pick apart the lake right there and decide that it's a little bit different these days. But with that said, we'll move on here. Myself and, darn it, glasses again.
He's getting old.
With that, myself and Senator Minor of the 30th, we hereby known that the Connecticut General Assembly hereby offers sincerest congratulations to the town of Winchester. And I'm going to present this tonight to the chairwoman of the 250th club here. I call it the club, but the party. The hometown Winchester 250th anniversary. We join together in the jubilant celebration to honor the residents and our shared in love for our hometown of Winchester. Our town is one of the most resilient spirited, which has weathered storms of the 1955 Hurricane Connie and Hurricane Diane, which passed over Connecticut within 1 week. We have many, many, many things that have gone on in the town of Winchester, and we've adapted and we've overcome. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this occasion, given the 21st day of May 2021, which we actually had this done on that day. It's been sitting on my desk at the house, but that's okay. At the state capitol, signed by President Pro Tem Martin Looney, Speaker of the House Matt Ritter, and Secretary of State Denise Merrill. And with that, Candy, I want to thank you for having me, and congratulations, Winchester. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay, for this. This will also go to Town Hall and where it will be displayed there. We also have an official statement from the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Connecticut. She takes great pleasure in offering our sincere congratulations to Winchester, Connecticut, in celebration of our 250th anniversary of its incorporation. Winchester's inviting atmosphere attracts many to experience all it has to offer, from the town's eclectic architecture to the alluring landscape of Highland Lake. Winchester has successfully maintained its charm for 250 years. Happy anniversary and congratulations on this incredible achievement. Susan Bysowitz, Lieutenant Governor, sent this along, so we really appreciate that she took the time to do this. Right now, I would like to invite our town manager, Josh Kelly, to come up and say a few words. Get this started. There you go, this one.
All right, thank you, Candy. And first and foremost, good evening, Winchester. How's everybody doing tonight? That's what I like to hear. So for those of you who don't know me, as Candy said, my name's Josh Kelly. I'm Winchester's 29th town manager after I took over the role in April after Bob Geiger took his retirement, and Bob's joining us here tonight. I am not from Winchester, as many of you know, of course. I'm joining you from Waterford, Connecticut. I'm following the state's motto, "He who transplants sustains," and it's been wonderful to be here. So thank you first and foremost for a very gracious and warm welcome. Founded in 1771, Winchester was just 4 years old when, in August of 1775, the king declared the colonies and, as part of the colony of Connecticut, Winchester, to be an open rebellion. Just a little more than a year later, Thomas Paine would write his ever-famous line, "These are the times that try men's souls." While Thomas Paine was obviously not very inclusive when he wrote this line, I can imagine the circumstances of the situation weighed equally on all members of the town, not just the men. As a town of just 5 years with a population of just a few hundred, Winchester got through the tumultuous era that was the American Revolution and went on to expand, grow, and thrive, but not without facing extraordinary challenges in the 245 years to follow. The residents of Winchester have faced tremendous loss through casualties of war, natural disaster, and yes, even theft. And every time that a hardship was faced and a loss was felt, that famous line, "These are the times that try men's souls," must have resonated with all of the members of this beautiful town. And as we struggle to move forward after a global pandemic that has taken the lives of over 5 million worldwide, including many of those that we know and love, this resonates with each of you in the auditorium today, I'm sure, and it does with me. But I'm here today to not remind you of that, but rather to remind you that the challenges that we face today are nothing compared to the promise of tomorrow. Because just a few lines after his dour beginning, Thomas Paine noted that we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Since I started here in my role in Winchester, I've been impressed, inspired, moved, and motivated by the kindness, thoughtfulness, and the care that I've seen exhibited, not just by one individual, but by the entire community as a whole, each and every day. These are the basic building blocks that any community needs to support each other through the hard times and better celebrate the good times. Winchester, and within it Winstead, are on the rise, with new businesses coming to our main street, with more volunteers coming out to support our town boards and commissions. And I want to thank Millie for the shout out. Please do get involved. As well as community programs and activities. And as we all know, we have an uptick of new residents joining us from other parts of the state and from around the country. The promise of tomorrow lies not in what may have befallen us yesterday, but rather in what we choose to do today. So today, we enjoy a wonderful performance put together by the Soldiers Monument Commission, and we honor, commemorate, and memorialize our past, giving it the respect it deserves and a special place in our hearts and minds. And as you head home, I hope that you will ask yourselves, your family members, and your friends this question: what can we do now that will make tomorrow and every day thereafter a little bit better? And not just for us, but for our Winchester and Winstead community as well. Whether you're joining us here in person at the Gilbert School or remotely on YouTube, I can't thank you enough for being here, for tuning in tonight for this kickoff of our town's 250th anniversary celebration. It's because of the caring community members just like yourselves that this town continues to grow to new heights. And I can't wait to see what the promise of tomorrow brings for us. Please enjoy the show.
Thank you for the opening comments, and we will begin in just a moment. Some of the meat from the deer we just killed and have a wonderful feast this evening. Strange, there appears to be plentiful game in this area, but I've seen no signs of any Indians.
Perhaps this was native hunting grounds only. I never expected this area to be so hilly, not like the Connecticut River Valley where we live. It was a long walk up here from the river. Tell me again, why did the general courts want this section of the colony surveyed?
Well, the land grant of 1686 set aside these unoccupied lands for some of the original settlers of Hartford and Windsor. And until May of 1744, no land was officially given to any of those residents.
Oh, my uncle, Reverend Thomas Buckingham, wanted the land surveyed. But like so many other things of the English government and court, nothing was done until a couple of years ago in 1758. But who will come out here to live? No roads. It's hilly and precipitous. It's going to be hard to get those Hartford and Windsor families to move from that fertile Connecticut River Valley to this area.
Yeah, I heard that some settlers named of Beach from the Goshen territory up a ways might have moved to this area.
Well, I hope he and his family are resilient enough to manage a homestead in this wilderness. I'm betting there's not much ever going to develop out here. Let's cook that meat and settle in here along this lake for the night.
Sounds good.
They call me the Widow Everett. My husband, Josiah, bought land up this way. He saw great promise in it. Josiah died. And I decided, well, we're still going. And I packed up the 7 children and my aged mother, and we moved up to Winchester, where there were only 3 other families living at that time. The first settler was Caleb Beach. And he had built the first home that we had in the town. But he sold the property and headed back to Goshen, where he died a few years later. And another house was built where he had lived, and that stone chimney still stands there today. So while many of you may have heard of Caleb Beach, I'm not sure you're familiar with Mr. David Austin. He was a very prominent citizen of the time. He purchased land in an area that no one could figure out why he was doing it. In the howling wilderness, he decided to buy land. And then he built a road that went down to it and started bringing in construction material. And before you knew it, he had built a sawmill and a grist mill. What a forward-thinking man he was, because he had harnessed the water power, and with people coming and settling in the area, the need for lumber would exist, and of course a grist mill was wonderfully helpful to those of us living here. So as the town continued to grow and prosper, we decided it was time that we become established as a formal township. And we had to petition the colonial legislature in Hartford. And in 1771, they decided that we were now an official township. And with that township recognition came roads. We had the Greenwood Turnpike and the Waterbury Turnpike, places that would connect us with the outside world, and travelers and settlers and supplies could come in. And we started to prosper. And at the same time that we started prospering, we started realizing, what in the world do we need to be part of King George in England? We're doing very well on our own, and he's not here to help us. In fact, he's taxing us. So I'm sure some of our neighbors were not fully supportive of the revolution, but most in Winchester Center were people who supported the Continental Congress, General Washington, and the Continental Army. And we had men, young and old, who went off to fight for the Revolutionary War. 2 of them, sadly, did not come home. But most of them who went felt that they had done something great to help secure our freedom in 1783 at Yorktown. The men from Winchester fought in a lot of battles that I'm sure you've heard about. Lexington and Concord, the Battle of Bunker Hill. They were with General Washington when he retreated through New Jersey and fought valiantly at the battles of Trenton and Princeton. They spent a very long, cold winter with him in Valley Forge. And while they were cold there, we were very cold here at home. We spent our time making things to keep them warm, sending off socks and caps and all sorts of clothing, whatever we could do to help out. And while it was hard for us to be here at home, we believed in the purpose of what we were doing, and we persevered through the hardships. We proved ourselves to be very resilient people. You know, one battle I forgot to mention was the Battle of Saratoga. That's the battle where General Burgoyne surrenders to Connecticut's own General Benedict Arnold, who we're not going to discuss tonight at all. But on his staff, General Arnold's staff, was a relative of someone fighting from Winchester, Amasa Wade. And somehow, when General Burgoyne surrendered, he had to surrender his royal coach. And that coach came back with Amasa, and he was the envy of everyone on Sunday mornings when they would take the royal coach to church and back. It certainly was quite the sight. So now that we had gained our independence from Great Britain and peace prevailed, more and more people began to find their way to our beautiful place in the world. And I believe that the Reverend Marsh is here to tell you more about what happened next. Reverend Marsh.
Thank you, Hannah. Fellow citizens, I moved from New Hartford to Winchester Center to accept a job offer to be the minister of the Winchester Center Church. Our meeting house, which was on the Winchester Green, was built in 1786. It had 2 stories, and my pulpit was on the staircase going to the 2nd floor. On the town green, our town militia would often train and drill. Also, that I found very disturbing, was a whipping post and stock that were used to punish those who misbehave. This plaque marks the spot. As its minister, I provided the spiritual leadership, and the church provided the meeting house. Oh yes, some of those meetings in the early 1800s were heated affairs. Moving to Winchester was based upon finding an affordable house, which thanks to our congregation, I was able to do so. My home is located on Chapel Street. A picture of a more modern rendition of the house I would like to thank the current owner, if they're in the congregation, for keeping it preserved. Not everyone who came to Winchester stayed. According to town clerk John Boyd, who lived here for nearly 81 years and who wrote the original history of Winchester and its families, in the early 1800s, the Hartford to Albany Greenwoods Turnpike, now Route 44, opened up more fertile and less harsh land in the west. Many of the younger residents who settled in what is known as Danbury Quarter area of our town abandoned their property and headed west to Oneida area of New York State. The old-timers here nicknamed this the Great Exodus. Old cellar holes are all that remain of their existence. The building and maintaining of the Greenwoods Turnpike, along with many of the other roads in New England, was done by private companies. And to recoup their investments and gain a profit, toll booths were established along the way. This toll booth was located 1/2 mile west of downtown Winsted. The creation of the Greenwoods Turnpike greatly benefited Winchester's farming community by providing transportation all the way to the Hudson River, which allowed Winchester's produce to be put on boats and sailed to New York City, a huge market. This picture shows a very crude and muddy road. But look real closely at this road. You see no potholes, do you? Not a one. It was decided to build a new meeting house in 1840, and the land for the new church was leased to the society by Isaac Bronson. The new building was contracted for in 1841 and dedicated in June of 1842. At that time, gated slips, or pews, were sold to the highest bidder to help defray some of the construction costs. The original oil lamps and chandelier that still grace the sanctuaries today were converted to electricity in 1944, when the electricity for the new furnace was installed. The Bronson Supply Company, which is to the left of our church, supplied Winchester Center residents with a post office, lumber, and some of our basic needs. The roads, which were nothing more than basic trails and cow paths between Winchester Center and Winsted, were in terrible condition and very difficult to travel. Year after year, we would petition the selectmen for a new road, but it kept getting voted down. Persistence paid off, and the Winchester Old Society finally got our new road. Boyd Street and a new Winchester Road were built, saving a 1/2 mile of travel and eliminating a few very steep hills, making transportation of goods and people between Winsted and Winchester much easier. Yes, Winchester's Old Society was very resilient. As transportation evolved, Winsted got a railroad.
Hello and welcome aboard the train I call Winchester 250. My name is Jim Pettit. I'm very proud and grateful to say I was raised here in this community named Winsted in the town of Winchester. Tonight, my colleagues and I will show you and tell you a little of our history of our favorite hometown. To bring the story to life, let's see a few older photographs for your viewing pleasure. Those lines on this old map, I can't believe it, but they're all old railroad lines. Not 91, not 84, not Route 8, not even Main Street. That's all railroad lines. Incredible. Isn't this map from 1877 amazing? Look at all the houses, the huge factories, the small shops, the rivers, the lake, the streets. Can anybody see buildings you recognize? I see my parents' historic house on Spencer Street next to the 4th District School, now the Mary P. Hinsdale School. As a conductor, this is one of my favorite pictures. The locomotive engine pulling a line of cars. In 1849, the first train rolled into Winstead, providing a faster and cheaper means of delivering many people and products into town, but also carrying our products not just to the cities and towns in Connecticut, but taking them to markets all over the world. I'm sure you will recognize a few names: the Gilbert Clock Company, Strong Manufacturing, the Union Pin Company, which produced over 1 million pins a day. Amazing. In town, we sent treated lumber, leather, furs, building materials, hand tools, dairy products, farm equipment, casket hardware, some of which adorn the fine caskets of Presidents Ulysses S. Grant and Benjamin Harrison, as well as the wealthy philanthropist Cornelius Vanderbilt, to name a few dignitaries, as well as a few of our own local heroes and citizens. We had woolen mills, blacksmiths. We had ice houses to preserve farm products for transport. There was even one on the corner of Lake and Meadow Streets. I delivered the Hartford Courant there as a boy. Winstead and Winchester continue to grow and prosper. In 1850, the population was about 2,000 people. In 1900, the population grew to almost 8,000, and many more people and growth to follow. With water power from Mad River, Still River, and even the lake runoff, plentiful free water meant cheap power to provide jobs for thousands of people and run factories to turn out thousands of great products, all attracting more people to our beautiful and growing town. This is our classic Main Street. That's the YMCA at the bend in the road. That looks like St. Joseph's steeple in the background, one of the many beautiful houses of worship and churches built by local skilled craftsmen with at least one, the Second Congregational Church, with several Tiffany and Company glass stained windows. That church is still vibrant today. I couldn't tell if that was Main Street or the East End Park. I think it's East End Park. Look at all the shops. Before railroads, goods, and transportation was brought by horse and carts. I'm happy to see someone put a blanket on one of their horses. The former Winstead train station at the corner of Willow and Bridge Streets, with the old Winstead Furniture Company building in the background. We've had our share of weather issues. This is the 1898 ice storm. At one time, there was an east and west Winstead with trolley service up and down town as well as to Torrington. Recognize anyone waiting for the train? On some days, we had as many as 6 trains stopping in town. That's a lot of freight being delivered and shipped, with people visiting, shopping, and moving here to live and prosper. At one time, we had 2 train railroad companies coming into town. The Naugatuck Railroad going north to south, and south to Winstead to Bridgeport, and on to New York. The New Haven Railroad going east to west, Hartford to Canaan and beyond. This is one of the round tables in Winstead, allowing the locomotive to turn and change direction. One was located behind the former A&P on Willow Street, and the other, I believe, on John Street. Simple yet functionable. The Opera House in Winstead, downtown, attracted many famous performers, including the John Philip Sousa Band, and entertainers, including Mark Twain. While even Buffalo Bill Hickok came by rail and put on 2 shows at Raleigh Field, drawing over 16,000 people, mostly brought to town by train. Quite a draw for an attractive and growing community. Obviously, this was a sold-out performance at the Opera House, built in the 1870s with seating for 600 patrons. Unfortunately, fires destroyed so many of our beautiful buildings, and now we have one of the finest volunteer fire departments anywhere. The Hurlbut Bank, pretty sure that's the center building, which shared space with the local jail at one time, which I found quite interesting. Water power was cheap and plentiful. This is a picture of Boyd's Water Wheel on Lake Street, which was for an iron forge shop powered by the falling water from Highland Lake to Main Street. Many businessmen built dams to power their factories. This dam was in the Still River, was for the Gilbert Clock Company factory on North Main Street. Horses needed to be taken care of as well, and this shop, it looks like the Berg in Buckley, provided livery and blacksmith services. This last photograph, the Winstead Edge and Tool Company on Lake and Meadow Streets, they produce fine steel tools for carpenters and construction projects, used locally and shipped to ports far and wide. I wish I could go on. There's so much to talk about, so much to learn about. The governor, the Secretary of State, all from Winstead. Pictures of the many elegant and busy hotels, beautiful homes. Electric Park on Highland Lake, the huge hotel on Highland Lake, the trolley, the racetrack, on and on and on. As what's been said before by Millie and others, I urge everyone to learn more about the history of the town you call home. Books by Virginia Schultz Charette, John Boyd, and many others. More reading material and photographs are available at our wonderful Beardsley Memorial Library. The Solomon Rockwell House, see the Cornelio film, and of course, take an exciting ride down the rails of history, the Naugatuck Railroad, just down the road in Thomaston. The same railroad lines used to bring the railroad to our town. What a unique and fun trip. I say it's a trip back to the future. Finally, the railroads have stopped coming into town, but thanks to each and every one of you and more to come, for our town, the engine of resiliency and progress is still running strong. Let's keep it going. I hope you enjoyed this part of the program. Thank you for your courtesy and attention. It's been my pleasure. Of course, there are souvenirs in the caboose.
I want to say thank you, Jim, or thank you, Mr. Train Conductor. Tonight, as we celebrate 250 years of resilience in our community of Winstead, in the township of Winchester, we are seeing a tapestry of generations woven together every generation in action, leadership, and deed, impacting our daily lives, yet in years to come, what will become our history. I'm Deirdre Houlihan DeCara, a lifetime resident of Winchester, and I represent 4 generations of Houlihans in our community, and I believe we have proven our resilience. In stories my dad would share, my great-grandfather, James, came to Winstead by train from New York as an Irish immigrant in the mid-1800s. He was a tailor by trade. He actually would commute to New York City to work, leaving his family in town. On returning one weekend, he arrived to find his wife and children had been struck by an epidemic and had already been buried. This would seem so very hard and shocking to believe, yet now, 150 years later, we find ourselves experiencing our own worldwide pandemic. Thankfully, James had the resilience to remarry, and my grandfather, James, was born in the 1880s. My grandfather had a clothing store, then with ready-made clothes that my great-grandfather would tailor fit for their customers. My dad, John Houlihan, born in 1909, told stories of how he would be sent on the trolley between the store in Torrington to his grandfather's tailoring shop in Winstead. Our family, for 4 generations, has always had a home on Highland Lake, yet my dad chose to purchase the Tunis Goodenough farm on South Road in Winchester in the 1940s, which is where I still reside. The property on a plateau of a hilltop was the perfect site to build the Torwin Airport, as Dad had learned to fly during World War II. We are the 7th family to live in the Saltbox Colonial House, originally built by Jonathan Coe in 1764. In my childhood in the 1950s and 60s, on our end of South Road, we had 3 dairy farms and 1 chicken farm, which was owned by Wallace and Lena Pendleton. Lena was by then a delightful old woman who who grew up in my house as she was the daughter of Tunis Goodenough. She would tell us tales of her childhood in the late 1800s. The Winchester Grange was founded in our living room in 1888, where Lena and her sister from upstairs, hanging over the banister, listened to all the grown-ups gathered below. Can you imagine what it was like the night of January 2nd to have most likely come by sleigh in the dark, cold, and freezing night after everyone's farm chores were completed to allow them an evening out? Mrs. Pendleton also shared how she attended school at the one-room red schoolhouse on Platt Hill, and she loved to describe her wedding, which was held in our dining room, decorated in pine boughs, with its wide colonial floorboards. Looking back on an idyllic childhood in Winchester, we swam at Park Pond, played with our country neighbors, attended Grange meetings, and helped with blueberry bazaars for the Winchester Congregational Church. We knew Mr. Elliot Bronson of Winchester Center, who wrote the Annals of Winchester, Volume 2, published in 1972, along with Frank DeMars, who promoted Winstead as the Laurel City back in the 1930s. And some of us here tonight in the play and in the audience appeared in Winchester's 200th anniversary pageant on the Winchester Green, directed by my mom, Virginia, and Marion Beecher, a pillar in our Grange. We know that life in our Winchester is very special, and that generations of families are woven into the strong fabric, contributing to our community life. And for whatever the future holds, we are filled with hope and are most definitely resilient and ready to pass on the torch. I remember my dad sharing with me in 1990 at a rededication ceremony of the Soldiers' Monument that 4 generations of our family had stood on these grounds, as his dad and grandfather had been present at the dedication in 1890. Here is Mrs. Simmons, and I hope that she's going to share insights with us to life in Winstead in the 19th century.
Well, I am here to tell you about things in Winstead during the 19th century, which is not such an easy thing to describe since the town was rather divided geographically. We had the East Village and the West Village and the flats in between. The East Village being the area of town that had settlers first, and the church up on Wallens Hill, where we now have East End Park. That whole section was the East Village. And then we had West Village. The West Village being more farm country, up by where Spencer Street is, in that general area. And each side had their shops and grocers that they liked to go and visit and do their business at. And in fact, there was a post office both in the East Village and the West Village. So imagine our surprise one morning when we woke up to find out that the Postmaster General in Washington City had declared that immediately the post offices in East and West Village were to cease operation, and they appointed Thomas Clark, the newspaper editor, to be the postmaster at a newly designated location on the flats. And you know, I heard that President Lincoln said that one of the things that he lost the most sleep about during the war was what to do to resolve the division in Winstead as regards the 2 post offices. And we had the same sort of situation with the churches. You had the First Congregational Church in the East Village. And at some point, people decided they wanted a church in the West Village. So they left what is now the First Church of Winstead, and they formed the Second Congregational Church in the West Village. I will say, though, that when they built the train depot, they put it right in the middle of town, right there in the flats. But there was a lot less contention than I might be making out to seem. During the Civil War, the ladies of Winstead came together and they worked to help provide things through the U.S. Sanitary Commission. In fact, the ladies of Winstead banded together and made coats and matching pantaloons for an entire rifle company. And when we were finished, we stuffed their pockets with little religious tracts and housewives, a little sewing kit for them to take off to war. And I personally am very active in the Women's Auxiliary of the Grand Army of the Republic. And we've had fundraisers here in town and done all that we could to help raise awareness for the soldiers who fought in the war, for the nurses who served, and for the families of those who lost their loved ones serving in the war. And in fact, I think I hear that train whistle. I need to head down to Hartford. I've got my bag packed, and I'm going to go do some more fundraising.
Scoundrels! Scoundrels and hornswagglers, all of them. And do you know who they are? The citizens of Connecticut. And do you know why? Because up until 1776, Connecticut had more slaves than any other colony in the entire Northeast. And why was that? Southern cotton. You needed the cotton to make the bolts of cloth so you ladies could sew your dresses. You needed the cotton thread to sew those dresses as well. So you kept the industry going in the South by demanding the cotton. And thus, workers in Connecticut that needed to do the menial jobs were slaves. But in 1784, there was the Gradual Emancipation Act passed in Connecticut. And that act decided that any slave child born to slave parents in the state of Connecticut would be freed by the time they reached 25 if they were male, 21 if they were female. But again, what is the problem here? What about those who are already slaves? What about their parents? Do they receive any kind of admission? Not at all. We will have slavery in the state of Connecticut until 1848, when those generations that were older and produced those births died off. So scoundrels and hornswagglers, I say again, the citizens of Connecticut. Half for slaves, half against it. Politics were unusually divisive in those days. But we had an active anti-slavery society. It was founded in 1838 by Uriah Tuttle, whose district ranged from Torrington up through Winstead into Winchester and beyond. The secretary was Jonathan Cole. The vice president was Noble Everett, Hannah Everett's grandson. And there were others involved as well. Jonathan Cole's son, Daniel Cole, the Reverend. Silas McAlpine, who lived in Winchester. All these people were starting to come together, and they were bringing more sentiments into the town against slavery. But we needed a cause. And in 1840, that cause came along. That was the Amistad. The Amistad was a slave schooner, Spanish-owned, coming back with a cargo of slaves from Sierra Leone to Jamaica. And these slaves, those who were left anyway, because many of them died on the trip, mutinied, as they shall say in court, mutinied, took over the ship, and tried their best to sail it back to Africa, but not knowing how to navigate, they ended up sailing it into northern waters, where cold, hungry, destitute, weathered, beaten, they were picked up and brought into the port of New Haven. Now we have another problem. This mutiny happened on the open seas. There is no jurisdiction anywhere for any country on the open seas. But they're in the United States territorial waters now, subject to United States laws. Slavery in Connecticut has essentially been abolished and will completely disappear by 1848. So what do we do now with these slaves? We put them on trial. And our own William Holabird, who is the district attorney for the state of Connecticut, is the prosecutor. And he has absolutely no use for abolitionists whatsoever. He would love to see these slaves get the guilty plea and sent back to wherever they were coming from, Spain, Jamaica, wherever they're to end up, and not be our problem anymore. But he lost. Okay? The slaves are set free, and we now had our cause. Okay? We now had our victory. Okay? It drew more people into the anti-slave movement. And now you start to get what was called the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was neither underground nor a railroad. It was simply a collection of houses and barns that were way stations that served as a way for the slaves to rest and recuperate and gain sustenance before they continued on their journey farther north, wherever it is they were going. So all these people who I had just mentioned, they were all involved in the Underground Railroad. They all had way stations. There were many towns along the way that acted as way stations. Farmington was the best known. There were the way stations in Danbury and Torrington and Waterbury, Washington, and on up and through Winstead and into Winchester, and on up north to Massachusetts. So we don't know how many stations there were. There's no record of that. We have no record of how many slaves were saved. Okay? All we know is that it was working and sentiment was growing. And now we're getting towards the end of the 1840s and into the 1850s. Harriet Beecher Stowe publishes her world-renowned novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Sold millions of copies. Okay? And the anti-slavery movement gains really big steam. Towards the end of the decade, in 1859, John Brown attempts his capture of the arsenal in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, not West Virginia, but Virginia at that time. It failed. He was put on trial, convicted of treason, and executed. And he was, by the way, the first American citizen ever convicted of treason in the United States up to that point. By 1860, we have Lincoln and the Republicans who win the election. The South now is extremely worried that the North is going, or not the North of the United States is going to abolish slavery all over the United States, since the sentiment in the North is so strong against it. 11 states secede from the Union. They form their own country called the Confederate States of America. In April 12th of 1861, Fort Sumter is fired on, and the war starts for 4 deadly, bloody years. Now, I'm not going to tell you about those 4 bloody years. I have a man here who is going to tell you a much more worthwhile story, a man who became a Medal of Honor holder, Samuel Horne.
Hello, my name is Samuel B. Horne. On April 15, 1861, the Winstead Herald editor, Thomas A. Clark, presided over a meeting held in Winstead to encourage young men to answer the call by President Abraham Lincoln for the 90-day volunteers to serve in the Union Army. As an Irish-born teenager, I was one of the first to step forward and step into the annals of Winstead history. 352 men enlisted in the Union and fought many battles, including Antietam, Cold Harbor, Port Hudson, and Petersburg. In all, 57 men from our town lost their lives. I was assembled into the 2nd Regiment Infantry, Company K, and then taken out after 90 days. I then rejoined as a sergeant into Company E of the 11th Infantry, which began a string of promotions until I was made captain of Company H. I saw action 25 times, and I was wounded 3. During the Cold Harbor Campaign on June 3rd, 1864, I was wounded twice within the hour. The painful shoulder wound made the overnight travel in a wagon over rutted roads to the field hospital a painful memory. The pain, the loss of blood, the lack of food made it the most wretched 24 hours in my Army life. 3 days after being promoted to captain, I received my final injury at Chapin's Farm on September 29th, 1864, which earned me the Medal of Honor. I was gravely wounded while carrying out an order to the front lines. My horse was shot from under me. I was pulled out from beneath the dead animal with severe internal injuries. I made my way by foot to the front lines and completed my mission. My long recovery took me off the battlefield, but my discharge on November 17th, 1864, did not take me out of the war. I volunteered, and I joined the Provost Marshal's office, which investigated criminal activities like counterfeiting and espionage. After the war, I eventually made my way back to Connecticut, where I set up a law practice. I was elected to the Connecticut State Legislature, representing Winstead in 1884, the first foreign-born representative to do so. In 1887, Connecticut Governor Phineas Lounsbury made me his aide with the rank of colonel. In 1870, Palmer Post 33 of the GAR, Grand Army of the Republic, which I helped to organize, suggested building a monument to honor men who enlisted in Winchester to fight for the Union in the American Civil War. The GAR, the predecessor of the VFW, was commanded by me in 1888. I was also a charter member of the Winstead Elks Club. In the late 1880s, Winstead Tanner, John T. Rockwell, and local merchants Caleb and William L. Camp donated 2 acres of land on Crown Street on which to build the monument. The site was formerly Camp's Hill. With the site determined, the Palmer Post and many other organizations and individuals contributed to raise funds. In 1887, Palmer Post turned management of the project over to Winchester Soldiers Memorial Association. Construction of the monument and park cost nearly $15,000, almost double the $7,500 that had been projected. The first stone wasn't laid until 1889, without much fanfare. In 1909, the Memorial Park Association turned the property and funds over to the town of Winchester to manage. In 1985, the Board of Selectmen, under Mayor Francis Hicks, established the Soldiers Monument Commission to oversee the site. The commission continues to do programming and fundraising. Soldiers Monument is styled after a Gothic revival tower. It is nearly 64 feet tall from the ground to the top of the flagpole. The monument was dedicated on September 11th, 1890, the date that the Connecticut Volunteers mustered in. They were the honored guests of the celebration. An estimated 10 to 20,000 spectators and guests attended, including the mayor, governor, Civil War veterans, other dignitaries, and marching bands. Special trains transported out-of-towners to Winstead for the dedication ceremony. A huge procession marched along Main Street, passing buildings that had been elaborately decorated with red, white, and blue bunting, banners, and flags. There was a great deal of newspaper coverage about the event, both before and after the dedication took place. The day after the dedication of the Winchester Monument on September 1890, I left Winstead to assume my position as consul at St. Thomas, West Indies, appointed by President Benjamin Harris. In 1895, I became Connecticut's labor commissioner, and on November 19, 1897, I was awarded the Medal of Honor for heroism in the Civil War. Starting around the beginning of the 20th century until the early 1920s, I was editor and part owner of the Winstead Herald. A castle-like stone arch on Crown Street serves as the entrance to the Memorial Park grounds. It dates 1860 to 1865. On the arch, indicating the years of the Civil War. The arch walkway around the monument, circular driveway, stone fences along Crown Street, and the water fountain were all completed after the Soldiers' Monument was dedicated. There's a fireplace on the first floor and a dedication plaque on an opposite wall that reads, "Erected by citizens of Winchester in recognition for their obligation to the loyal men who represented them during the War of the Rebellion, whose names are herein perpetuated in grateful remembrance of their patriotic service, 1861 to 1865. 5 long marble plaques on the second floor are inscribed with names of over 300 men who enlisted in Winchester to serve in the Civil War. And an imposing bronze statue is mounted on the side of the tower monument above the roof line. It is about 8 foot 3 inches tall and weighs 2,000 pounds. The statue depicts a standard bearer, a soldier who carries the flag. The figure's stance honors the soldiers who fought to save the Union. It faces south, the hands on hips, elbows bent, and sword angle. I posed for that statue. Funds to purchase the 2 cannons that flank the monument were donated around 1901 by Mrs. Thomas Montague Clark in memory of her late husband. On January 26, 1984, the Soldiers' Memorial was placed in the National Registration of Historical Places. And on September of 1990, a granite marker was placed on the west lawn of the grounds, marking the 100th anniversary of the site. Thank you.
Hello. Welcome to the Beardsley Reading Room. I'm Delia Rockwell Beardsley. I'm so delighted you've come to visit.
Well, Mrs. Beardsley, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to meet you. I'm Marianne Mitchell.
Thank you so much for coming. You may know that I opened this reading room in honor of my late husband, Elliot Beardsley. He was one of the most well-known citizens and well-off citizens at the time of his death. He actually owned several manufacturing companies, including the Empire Knife Company with Mr. Alvord, and also the Beardsley Scythe Company. Mr. Beardsley was a deacon of the church. He was a director of the Winstead Savings Bank, and he was also a state senator, and he would be so proud that his name has stood for generations to come in this institution.
Oh my. I was born and grew up in Winchester Center, and my father, Jonathan Blake, was a representative in the state legislature in 1851. I wonder if he and your husband knew each other.
Perhaps they did.
When my parents passed, I built a home on the east side of Winstead, across from East End Park. And every day when I look at that former military parade ground, I envision that it could be a beautiful park. And I would just love to see it be a community gathering place.
Yes, that would be lovely. What a vision you have.
I would love to build a fountain where flowers could grow, and in the summer, children could cool their feet. I think that it would just be a beautiful place. And if I don't manage to build that before I pass from this earth, I plan to leave money within my will so that that can be built. And you know that fountain did get built and became the first monument in the park.
Wonderful. So beautiful.
In 1905, thanks to a donation by Charles Pine, another monument was built in East End Park. Charles had enlisted at the age of 16 in the 2nd Regiment from Winstead, and he served as a drummer The monument he donated commemorates Winstead veterans of 4 significant battles in the Civil War. There was Cold Harbor, Antietam, Port Hudson, and Petersburg. Many years later, the Rotary Club will build a bandstand in the park. Have you heard about the plans that the town of Winstead has to build a road around the Long Pond, which some people call Highland Lake?
Oh, no, goodness, please, I'd love to hear about it.
Harvey Wakefield, who was a farmer in Colebrook, donated a large bequest to the town of Winstead to build the road and improve the existing path. There's a boat launch, and there are plans to build a hotel and a resort, but there's no easy way to get there. Someday I'll bet there will be lots of people that go to that boat landing, and people will come from all over to visit the Electric Park Pavilion for concerts and dancing.
I do love dancing.
The town honored Harvey Wakefield and his gift to the town by naming the new road Wakefield Boulevard. And they erected a plaque, a large bronze plaque on the ledge of Second Bay. And it reads a tribute in remembrance to Harvey Wakefield, a citizen of Winchester, in grateful recognition of his bequest to the town, which has enabled it to provide for public use of this lakeside drive. Delia, I love your reading room. Do you have any plans to expand it or do anything with it?
Yes, indeed we do. As you can see, we're starting to burst at the seams at our current location. The reading room was first opened at the Beardsley block on the corner of Main Street and Lake Street. But as the collection grew and grew, several years from now, after I'm gone, there will be a group that forms called the Ladies Library Association, and they will work in support of moving the collection to another building. Yes, and so they will enlist the aid of a gentleman by the name of Jennison Whiting, who had plans to build a library building on the corner of Monroe and Main Street, a short distance from here. Mr. Jennison did not want his name on his library, and therefore it would be called the Memorial Library. And eventually, our Beardsley collection would move into that building, and it will become the Beardsley and Memorial Library, which people oftentimes wonder why it has 2 names, and that's why. And up until that point, you actually had to pay a subscription fee in order to join the library of $2 per year. But in 1899, the Beardsley and Memorial Library would become a free, publicly funded library for the citizens of Winchester and Winstead. Now, as you can see, this is the beautiful building that we all know and love today. I mentioned earlier when I introduced myself that my name is Delia Rockwell Beardsley. My family were the Rockwell family that moved down from Colebrook and built the beautiful home on Prospect Street, the Solomon Rockwell House, which eventually would be given back to the town and would become its historical society. Now, when I passed away, I was living in that home at the time, and in my obituary, they said such wonderful things about me and about my benevolence to the town. And I'd like to read to you a little passage from there. It said, "In one thing we especially rejoice today, that while contributing to the happiness of an untold number of persons, Mrs. Beardsley has secured for her own name a monument more enduring than the costliest of marble. The death of such a person is the severest loss a community can sustain. Let us hope her example in doing good for others may be followed by all who enjoy its benefits." And I'm so pleased to see that so many in our community have followed in those philanthropic footsteps as we have. Do you know of any other places?
Well, you know, the East End Park is near and dear to my heart. It has been improved by the gifts of so many people. In 1927, a drinking fountain was donated by Jane Nesbitt in memory of her father, Samuel W. Pine. It was built next to the Civil War monument that her brother, Samuel H. Pine, built in commemoration of the Winstead veterans that fought in four of the battles of the Civil War.
The benefactors of our town were also responsible for building such places as the Litchfield County Hospital, which was built through the combined efforts of donations and fundraising and also appropriations from the state legislature over many, many years. The land that the hospital was built upon was given by Ms. Julia Batchelor of the Thayer Scythe Company. Maria Brown and her daughter Susan Perry also gave very generously to the hospital, which was finally completed in February of 1902. Additionally, the Batchelor family gave money and continued their support of the hospital by building a very spacious 20-room nurses' home adjacent to the hospital. The home opened in May of 1912, and it helped provide accommodations nearby for the staff and for the trainees of the hospital. It was really a wonderful thing. And let's also remember, oh yes, the area around Rowley Street. Around Rowley Street, the Woodruff Gate beautifully marks the entrance to the Forest View Cemetery and the recreational areas there. And that was through the donation of Mr. Alfred Woodruff, and he gave $5,000 to build the beautiful gate. And did you know that the area right next to there at one time was going to be a dumping ground? A dumping ground. And through the generosity of Mr. Gaylord and Mr. Tiffany, they had the vision of making it a playground and a recreational area for children and families. And that is the beautiful facility that exists there today.
During her lifetime, Mary Ann Blake Mitchell was a teacher and quietly gave to so many people and charities. When she died 130 years ago, her obituary stated, "She bestowed her liberal benefactions to so many different persons that no one can estimate the amount of good done by her charities. One of the best type of New England women has finished her work."
Yes, I'm honored, and as I'm sure you are also, to be among the ranks of the very resilient and gracious citizens of our great town. Their generosity made Winchester become a better place to live for all.
We're going to take a 15-minute break now, but I'm sure your curiosity, and I sure hope it has, been heightened by what you've already heard about our town. Now, you can satisfy your curiosity because we have books out there, and one of the authors is here, and she'll do the signing of that, Verna Gilson. There's other books out there. There's so much more to learn, so we're going to have you come back. But in the meantime, during the intermission, we'll be showing you some aerial views of Winstead, and you're welcome to stay in the audience and watch them. But we'll be back here for Act 2 in about 15 minutes. There's some refreshments outside being provided by some of the Gilbert School students. So take a break, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.
over the age of 35, this is how much earwax is trapped.
We hope you've enjoyed the videos. The first two videos are available. The third one, the Soldiers Monument video, you can also pick up on the Soldiers Monument Winstead.org website. As you can see, it was done by a local resident, tied into the music. If you have not seen it in its entirety, it's one of the most dramatic videos that you will see of the Soldiers Monument, the up-close pictures of the soldier. And you can thank Winstead resident Steve Buchanan for doing that and tying in the music to that. So there's where you can see that. But as I said, if you didn't see it in its entirety, go to soldiersmonumentwinstead.org, and there's a link there to that video. And we'll start in just a second. Well, maybe 30 seconds. We got some people coming in. Cash, go. Well, as you know, it was easy to get a train from Waterbury and Hartford to out here in the mid-1800s. Something about the northwest area of the state attracting newcomers. Now, as our town's population slowly grew, immigrants from Europe arrived at various stages, helping to build churches, work in factories, and added culturally to our town. Some came here alone to work, arriving on the trains and trolleys. Others met up with family members who had arrived here earlier. We're going to meet some of these immigrants, and as they talk in their native language, the translation of what they are saying will be on the screen in front of you. Now, one of the earliest immigrant cultures came from Italy. Here's one of those good people coming in now.
Così tante persone. Cerca mio marito, è stato un viaggio lungo. Mi sono viaggiato 13 giorni in barca. Vengo da Genova, Italia, a Ellis Island, New York. Da lì mi sono viaggiata in treno per Winstead. Tante persone. Mio marito è venuto a Winstead l'anno scorso, 1913. Lui lavora nella Chiesa Cattolica come operaio. Lavora per un buon uomo, signor Joseph Carey. Vivremo con i cugini Edna e Luis nella piccola Italia, via della Castagna. Lavoro con Edna presso la Maleficio. Noi risparmiamo soldi per comprare una casa, iniziare la nostra famiglia. Opportunità in America, opportunità nel Winstead. Mi sono contento stare qui. Vedo mio marito. Leo, amore mio, qui sono. Amore mio, sono qui. Leo, amore mio, qui sono. Amore mio, sono qui.
Thank you for sharing your story. Well, here comes another traveler. I understand your relatives came from Ireland. Can you please share your story with us?
I will, for sure. Rugu agus tógu in éireann mé, ceann na háiteanna is deise ar dón. Ach in 1985 áfach, bhí geantanas obair an, agus ar nós go leor eile de muintir na tíre sin, hin mé féin is mar chéile dul Rimmecha go New York an áte rugu eisin. Tar éis trefse gá bhliain go le a chaithó an sin, wóga mar go Winstead. Bhí ar nóch in agin de héal na carach, agus ó tá dréicht na tíre an seach cosal go mai le dúthe na héireann, darí mar ar savín seo an seach. Ar siúló de hógal sríd sráid na darach dam si mé go leor animnacha éireannacha sa rélig. Dúirt cuasalam gur tháinig na daoine sin go dtí an bhaile I dús bara chun obair áil sna manacana áitiúla. Fá mór le ré a rugu do hismothirí as éireann ná Séamus Padda Maclin. Rugu Séamus in 1867, drascail séar na scoile na Publi, thuaidh sé le dlí, agus bunú cleachta sa bhaile. Rinneadh clérach an bhaile de. Capú éan an attorney do chuirt an bhaile agus tamil beag in a dhéir sin ba é an bhaiste foiste. In 1950 tógu chun chodála é agus chuir sé sacht session is deachán. Déag sé in 1930. Géal eile ó ré faidir siar ná sin ná Samuel Belton Horn. Bás tulach mór ag gunda íhálaí dó. Frid Samuel sa choro character, agus ba an céad óglacht as Connecticut Danu an brun orna de wara crogachta. Na ní luhia agam an ach bert nach brethe a roconi orhu a Winstead, vi go lor ella an nach rocál orhu a corfuhe sa duhe sha. Ma valach féin, tam taréis ahan nerchar go lor a dini de munche erina. Agus is bra le mananam nach a lu an sha. Muncheri géhin, muncher devani, muncher macrana. Ach níl an sin ach beagán acu. Is mé atá sunna sásta bheith mo chonaí an seo na measc.
Thank you for your contributions. Well, here's a man that looks a little lost. How can we help you?
Wo ist die Urwurststätte? Lass uns sehen. Ich habe einen Brief, das mir mein Bruder geschrieben hat und sagt, dass ich zuerst die große Kirche suchen soll und dann den Park. Den Park. Die große Kirche? Es gibt hier zu viele Kirchen in dieser kleinen Stadt. Welche Kirche? Entschuldigen Sie, mein Herr. Tut mir leid. Oh, du kannst kein Deutsch. Und ich kann kein Englisch. Auf Wiedersehen. Oh, Grüß Gott. Dieses wird sehr schwer sein. Und mein Bruder sagt, dass es für mich eine Stelle in die Gilbert Uhrwerk gibt. Ihr braucht ein Holzstädter, ein Molder. Also Mann in der Vereinigten Staaten, das heißt. Und das ist, was ich mache. Herr Gilbert wird mich anstellen, meine Bruder sagt, und wenn ich gut erschaffe, Herr Gilbert wird mich das Geld leihen, für mich mein eigenes Haus zu bauen. Sinnlos. Sinnlos. Er macht das für alle seine Arbeiter. Aber zuerst muss ich die Uhrwerk finden. Es ist in der Straße bei dem Park. Der Straße bei dem Park. Ach, hey.
Well, I'm sure you will find work here, and I'll bet you're going to build that house that you want to have for your family. But many immigrants came to this country and our town to escape prosecution and find a safe place. Please, sir, can you tell us about your family?
Dzień dobry. Moja rodzinna podróż do Stanów Zjednoczonych zaczęła się jak wiele innych w tamtych czasach. W roku 1939, kiedy wybuchła II wojna światowa, rodzina mojego ojca została wywieziona na Syberię z nielicznymi innymi polskimi rodzinami w ramach programu relokacji. W 1942 roku mój dziadek Stanisław zostawił żonę w ciąży, zgłosił się na ochotnika do II Wolnej Armii Polskiej. Mój ojciec urodził się na Syberii. Nigdy nie widział swojego ojca, który w tym czasie walczył z faszystami w Afryce. Po wojnie dziadek wyjechał do Ameryki, bo w komunistycznej Polsce groziła mu śmierć za walkę z polską armią, a nie z Sowietami. W 1979 roku mój ojciec otrzymał pozwolenie, aby odwiedzić swojego ojca i przyjechał do Ameryki i zobaczył się z nim po raz pierwszy, gdy miał 37 lat. Później ja, Andrzej, wraz z mamą, bratem i siostrą otrzymaliśmy pozwolenie na przyjazd do Ameryki, ale ta oferta była jednorazowa i bez powrotu do naszej ojczyzny. 20 lat później ja, Andrzej, przyjechałem do zachodniej części północnego Connecticut. Poznałem tutaj dziewczynę, zakochałem się i zostałem. Ta część stanu jest bardzo piękna i pod wieloma względami przypomina mi moje rodzinne miasto Duszniki Zdrój. Czuję się tutaj jak w domu i teraz, po wielu latach, mam zaszczyt, aby być tutaj zaproszony, aby opowiedzieć wam moją osobistą historię, jak ja trafiłem do miasta zwanego Winchester.
We're very glad that you chose to come to this area and to settle down with your family here. In recent years, our town has been enriched by immigrants from a variety of Spanish-speaking countries, from the Caribbean and Latin America. Tell us, young woman, can you tell us something about your family's decision to call our town your home?
Hola, me llamo Winifred Silva y me mudé a los Estados Unidos con mi familia cuando tenía 8 años. Mi familia decidió mudarse a los Estados Unidos porque hay más oportunidades. Mis padres me dieron la oportunidad de tener buenos estudios. La razón por qué nos mudamos a Winchester fue porque mi abuela vivía en New Jersey y no le gustó por la inseguridad que había. Entonces, ella decidió emigrar a Connecticut porque vio que era un pueblo tranquilo, y así comenzó nuestra aventura en Winchester, Connecticut. The Spanish community in Winchester is a wonderful community to be a part of. The community is very welcoming to everyone. It's comforting that my peers are always eager to learn more about my culture, whether that means that they enjoy the food or the music. The Gilbert School is very supportive of other cultures as we are allowed to celebrate and share our culture with the student body. As a senior here at the Gilbert School, I hope that these celebrations are turned into traditions.
And our population continue to grow. Our fresh water supply, encompassing both Rug Brook and Crystal Lake reservoirs, almost didn't come together. Many of the town's industrialists contributed heavily to the building of a tunnel between the two lakes. But it was William L. Gilbert who, nearing death, added more to his original gift to ensure the completion. Yes, that's the same Gilbert whose clocks became famous around the world. When he died, Gilbert left an endowment for building and maintaining a children's home on Williams Avenue. Now, the home was built in 1890, but it was torn down on this same property in 1957 to make way for the building that you are now in.
I can't believe they're actually tearing down the Gilbert Home for Friendless Children.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it either. This is unbelievable. I have so many memories in that building.
You went there too?
I did.
My mom dropped me off in 1919 when I was 8 years old. My dad went to the Great War and got himself killed. Mom was out of work, out of money, and out of food, and she just couldn't support me anymore. I can't fault her, though. The Gilbert Home was a place that really treated me well and got me ready for adulthood. I don't think Mom could have done it for me in her condition.
Wow. Well, I don't remember my parents at all. The state determined that they weren't fit to be parents, so I was brought there by the Litchfield County Temporary Home. And don't get me wrong, though, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, me too. I got to know all the other kids really fast. They got us up at 6 o'clock in the morning. They got us out there doing our chores. The boys, we had to go feed the animals, slop the pigs, collect the eggs from the chickens, clean the eggs from the chickens. We didn't know it at the time, but we were getting a really solid work ethic built into us.
It's true. You know, the girls in the mornings, we would get up and we'd make the beds and change the linens and do things like that before we got breakfast and ready for school that day. But it certainly, Gilbert Home gave me the skills I would need to become a wife and a mother and a homemaker later in life. It was wonderful. Do you remember what we did on Sundays?
Oh, Sundays. Sundays, we'd get up nice and early. We'd get dressed in our best Sunday clothes. All the kids, boys and girls, would meet out in front of the home, and they'd walk us from the Gilbert home all the way down to the church at the bottom of Spencer Hill.
Yeah.
It was quite a sight to see. I really wish I could have met Mr. Gilbert.
Oh, well, sadly, Mr. Gilbert only lived for a year after the home was established. But that first Christmas, he was able to spend it with the first children in the home, and they all got to take turns sitting on his lap and singing songs. It must have been an amazing experience.
Oh, he had such a vision for the future. He had the house built to house plenty of kids at the time, knowing that there was going to be a need for the friendless children. Little did you know, at one time there was going to be over 300 kids in that school at the same time. Granted, this was after they built the east wing, the west wing, the laundry, and the kitchen, in addition to what the original house was. All told, over 3,000 kids came through that school in the 66 years that it was there.
That's pretty amazing. Hey, did you know Pops?
Oh, Pops, Mr. Van Wy, Eugene Van Wy was the best. He was kind of new when I got there, but he was our superintendent, and he was our superintendent he was a superintendent at the home for 45 years. Wow. Did you realize there was only 3 superintendents for the entire length of time that was there?
No, I didn't.
Mr. Dwight Case was the first one in 1890 when it was built, and he was there till 1910. And then Charlie Morse took over for 3 years till 1913. And then Mr. Van Wy was the man for the next 45 years, and Mrs. Van Wy was the matron for all 45 years.
That's pretty amazing. Did you go to the Happy Valley camp?
I didn't know about the Happy Valley camp.
Wow. Well, that was pretty neat. They had a camp up by Colebrook River, and the boys would go there, and I think it was in August, and they would sleep in tents and go fishing and learn how to cook their food over a campfire. I mean, it sounds like it was absolutely amazing. And while the boys were doing that, we went to a summer cottage and we learned how to, refine our sewing skills and cooking and things of that nature. Those are some of the best memories I have. But truly, one of my finest memories is going to the library and being able to get a book out of the library all on my own. I thought that was fantastic.
Wow, that camp must have been a little before my time. Have you seen the memorial and the tombstones that are down at the cemetery for the 20 kids that died while they were at the school, or at the home, pardon me? It's at the Forest View Cemetery by the ball field.
Yeah, I have seen that.
Yeah, most of the kids died from the diseases that were common for the time, like tuberculosis and meningitis. The dates on the tombstones go from 1892 to 1908.
Wow. Yeah, I did hear something about a child drowning. And, if something like that had happened to me when I was at the home, nobody would have cared except for the people that I knew at the home. They became my family.
Considering how many of us kids went to the home, I don't think the 20 is a huge number of children to die, especially with the lack of medical advancements they had. The Gilbert home saw to it that the kids got really good medical attention. Dr. Pratt was there for 45 years as the kids' physician, and he made sure that he kept the new kids coming in separate for a few days from the kids who were already at the home to make sure that they weren't contagious in any way, because the Gilbert home would not allow new children that were either terminally ill or contagious to enter the home.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So, was the Boys Brigade around when you were there?
Oh, the Boys Brigade, that was the greatest thing for me. We got to dress up in the brown uniforms that they had. We got to carry our guns, and Mr. Case really got us practiced marching and parading around. The practices were long and tough, but boy, were they worth it. We got to be in parades, and we got to compete against other kids in other homes.
That sounds like
so much
fun.
It was awesome.
Wow. Yeah, they didn't have anything really like that for the girls. We did have a flag squad, but boy, what you were doing, that sounds like
awesome.
Lots of fun.
You said you were here in the 40s. I was in the 20s. it became so busy at one time. What do you think happened? Why are they now tearing this place down?
Well, I think, after World War II was over and, everything was doing so well, people were more prosperous, that families could take care of their children. There wasn't a need to send friendless children like ourselves someplace, that they were capable of taking care of them themselves. So I believe the Gilbert home worked with the state, and the children that were still there were put someplace else, and then here we are today.
Yeah, now they're tearing it down. Geez, I hope they build a nice place in place of it.
I hope so too.
Well, our town had its share of national recognition, not only from very famous places like the Gilbert home, but from many of the industries that generated products that were sold around the world. And some were said to be the finest products ever made anywhere in the world, right here in Winstead. But there was also stories that provided a chuckle and sometimes a very hearty laugh. Well, here's one of those writers who made Winstead famous. Why, it's Lou Stone.
I'm just coming down, 1926. It's my last day running the presses, turning it over to Thomas Haggerty. The Citizen is going to be in great hands. He's got good authors, Joseph O'Brien, whose book is out in the lobby. But I grew up in the Citizen. I was born in Winstead, lived on High Street. One day, 13 years old, I went down to Main Street, and there was this new company open, and they were printing a paper. They said that Thomas Clark paper was so political, so Republican. It basically caused the war. They were going to make a nice apolitical newspaper. Be nice for a change to have an apolitical newspaper. But I started out 13 years old as a printer's devil. What that meant was I had to be responsible for getting the inks and getting the trays ready for all the printers who were actually doing the big work. And all I wanted to be was an author. But they weren't letting me do that. Then finally I was looking at the New York Herald, and they had a contest for someone to come up with a story that they'd print down in the New York, big city New York papers. And I looked around and I couldn't come up with anything. It's not easy to make fake news. So I heard tale of somebody up in the North Woods up by Smith Hill who's been wandering around without any clothes on. So I got in touch with the local selectman. It wasn't Candy Perez. It was Riley Smith. Now everybody believes that Riley Smith is a real name because it's Smith Hill. And Riley's a Winstead name, so Riley Smith. He's a very honest selectman from town, so of course it has to be true. Well, it took off. To my surprise, everybody wanted to know about it. And on top of it, it was, well, do you have any other stories for us? Yeah, that wild man's great. What do you do next? Well, what do you come up with in a small hick town like Winstead is? So we sent stories to New York about the farmers up here, like the hen that after a fire was laying hard-boiled eggs. And on the 4th of July, the eggs were red, white, and blue, and pre-cooked. And then the hen that got lost and was on the milk train to New York City, to get fare back home, it laid an egg for the conductor. They got tired of those little hens and chickens jokes, so I started going for personal ones, like the guy on Chestnut Street, Carmen Becerra, who would lie out on his porch at night, but because he didn't like the mosquitoes, he decided to paint a spider on his forehead. Now, who would believe such a thing would happen? But you never know. There's a farmer who lost his watch, and when he finally had to slaughter the cattle, he found it in one of the stomachs. And the stomach had kept winding the watch for 7 years. These were crazy. This was back when fake news was good news and something fun. World Weekly News, God bless its soul, is no longer with us. But as Mark Twain said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So my fame and reputation grew, and Winstead became known as a crazy place to live. And there's just a ton of fake news. So at my death, someone's going to write a poem. See if I can find it on this newfangled newspaper thing here. A man of 90 danced a jig. A farmer talks to a talking pig. One has a cow that gives ice cream. One finds a fortune through a dream. 10 miles one walks with wooden legs. A speckled hen lays dated eggs. A hunter finds a mastodon, and that's the truth from Winstead Con. Well, the town got its jollies. I moved from High Street up to up on the Wakefield Boulevard, started building cabins and living there year round. And after I died, the town built a bridge right near my house, and it was called Stone Bridge. It was made of wood, and it went over Sucker Brook.
Well, thank you, Lou, for a little bit of laughter. And did he say fake news? Yeah, something like that. And of course, religion was very important to our community. Beautiful stone churches were erected, and religious communities grew and diminished. Please, Miss, could you share some of what you know about this?
Following the Revolutionary War, religion diversity in Connecticut increased. Our small town is an example of this transformation, rich in religious history evidenced by magnificent churches. In 1786, the First Ecclesiastical Society of Winchester built a meeting house for divine worship on the town green. 55 years later, the church was moved facing the green. The current day wooden structure served first as a school, with the chapel becoming the Winter Church. Winchester had all the needed natural resources for the Industrial Revolution. The immigrant population needed to run the mills, created the need for churches. The first congregation, Winstead's oldest church, the first Congregational Church, was founded in 1778. To accommodate the growing membership, the church moved 4 times before the cornerstone of the present church at 95 North Main Street was laid in 1900. The foundation of the splendid Gothic-style church is native stone from the Brook Street quarry. By the late 1890s until the Roaring 20s, population growth and competition among churches being built during this prosperous time brought enthusiasm, new energy, and excitement to Winstead. The masonry work of local contractor Joseph Carey is recognized in 4 magnificent structures: St. James, St. Joseph, United Methodist, Second Congregational Churches. The St. James Episcopal Church was organized in 1846 with 15 members. By 1923, membership grew with the need for a larger gathering place. With generous bequests, the current Gothic-influenced fieldstone building at 160 Main Street was dedicated in 1924. Up until 1847, Roman Catholics gathered in private homes. In 1852, a wooden structure was erected on Oak Street. The influx of Italian, Polish, and Irish immigrants saw the need for a larger house of worship. The present Gothic-style St. Joseph Roman Catholic Church on the corner of Oak and Main Streets was dedicated in 1916. The splendid edifice contains stained glass from Austria and altars from Italy. Methodism came to Winsted in 1790. Rich in history, the Winsted Methodist Church participated in social changes of each era with zeal and reform. In 1832, the active parish moved from Spencer Street to a wooden structure on the corner of Main and High Streets. In 1902, more property was purchased, the site of the present brilliant Romanesque stone edifice. Noted for several beautiful stained glass windows, a 1999 repair cost as much as a 1902 church building campaign, $65,000. In 1854, because of rapid population growth and distance, 51 members of the First Congregational Church and 6 members from other local churches organized the Second Congregational Church in the West End of Winsted. The congregation moved twice before 1899, when the cornerstone of the current impressive granite and sandstone French Gothic-style church at the intersections of Spencer, Hinsdale, and Main Streets was laid. Today, the active church is known as the Church of Christ. Etched in our town history and remaining today are several buildings that once served as houses of worship. In 1890, a wooden chapel at 15 Case Avenue was erected to serve the Baptist community. Shortly after 1910, declining membership saw Baptist merge with the First Congregational Church. In 1971, the building was sold to the Fraternal Organization of Redmond. The building was again sold in 2019. Prior to 1911, members of the Christian Science Society met in homes while the White Temple at 72 High Street was being constructed. Membership in this society declined. In 1941, the building was sold to the Elks Lodge, number 844. St. Andrew's Masonic Lodge, located at 27 Wheeler Street, houses a fraternal organization established in 1823. To this day, the organization plays an important role in local civic and business affairs in Winsted. Former members are still remembered by the streets named in their honor. To name a few: Boyd, Hinsdale, Holabird, and Wakefield. Our community is fortunate to have congregations large and small, new and old. The Jewish congregation has existed in Winsted since 1912. For 40 years, this congregation met in the previously owned St. James Episcopal Church on the banks of the Still River. The building was destroyed in the 1955 flood. The hard-working, dedicated Jewish congregation built the new brick structure, Temple Beth Israel Synagogue, in 1957. In 1961, a small group of Christian Bible students formed the Winsted Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses at 970 Main Street. By September 1970, the current meeting house was completed, built by all in the congregation. The Faith Bible Church, a non-denominational church valuing sound biblical teachings, focusing on the giving powers of God's grace, was formed in Norfolk. The small active church moved to 368 Main Street, Winsted in 1987. Our brief tour has come to an end. Please know that each church welcomes you. The doors are open for an inside tour or for a moment of solitude and thanksgiving. It was my pleasure to share the history of these town treasures.
After World War I and the influenza virus that followed, we began to re-strengthen as a community. And then came December 7th, 1941. Here are a couple of people who had roles and responsibilities during World War II.
Don't I recognize you?
Yeah, you look familiar.
Yeah, I just got back from the war in the Pacific. I was with the 169th. You know, we got our start here in Winstead, Company E. A bunch of us, boys from high school, were going to join the National Guard Company, Company E, which in the pre-war times, that's what the nation depended upon in the United States was the National Guard. Okay, so we joined it not for patriotic purposes, but to get some extra money, because it was going to pay a few dollars a week for the drilling that we did, and a few more dollars a month for going out on other meetings at different armories. So it was great putting money in our parents' pockets.
I bet it was.
Yeah, so we had a bunch of boys that joined up with us. We had Jack O'Brien, Kenny Dietland, Joe Cifaldi, Joe Merolda. Who else we had? George Attella, Kenny Fox, and Francis Fox, the other two Fox brothers. Did I say Ed Merolda?
Yes,
well,
you
whatever.
did.
Ed Merolda, I knew him pretty well too, and his brother Ted. So we all trained at Camp Landing in Florida. And that was through 1941, where we were federalized in February. That made us a national division, much like any other division, because of the difficulties, the war footing that everybody was on due to Hitler and Mussolini and Hirohito, all the fighting that was going on all over the world. We had to protect ourselves. So we trained down in Camp Landing. Pearl Harbor happened. Okay. Well, now we're not just nationalized. We are really in it for the long haul. So we trained and trained and trained. And other guys that we knew also went off to other branches, like John Canty. Remember him?
I do remember him.
Yeah, he liked airplanes. He joined the Air Corps. And Ted Morrell, I mentioned earlier, he went to the Marines. He was with the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal.
Wow.
Right? So, and then there was George Sandlin, who joined the 34th Infantry Division and fought on Italy at Monte Cassino as a forward observer with the artillery that was attached to that division. So we went everywhere. Now we went to the Pacific, and we were on New Georgia Island, and that island was absolute hell. It was hot. It was filthy. There were snakes and critters and all kinds of nasty things running around besides the Japs that we had to fight all the time at night. Okay? Didn't matter. Took a hell of a toll on us, but got through it. Okay? Went to Guadalcanal, rebuilt the division, and then we went to the Philippines. We were fighting there when the war ended. So some of us didn't make it. Okay? Kenny Fox died on New Georgia Island.
Wow.
Kenny Dietland, he died in the Philippines. John Canty, he was shot down over Normandy.
Oh my goodness.
So that happened. Okay? But now we're home. I'm ready to get back to city life.
Well, welcome home. It's good to
Thank
see you
you.
here.
So, but what happened here? We hardly got any mail out there. It was so unreliable. You get one letter every 6 months.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, because believe me, people wrote lots of letters. Well, here at home, things were hard. The factories in Winstead all were still open. They were doing war production. So a lot of the ladies here at home, we took on jobs in the factories. The Winstead Hosiery Factory, they kept making socks and underwear, but they made socks and underwear for soldiers like you. And let's see, the Gilbert Clock Shop. They didn't make clocks during the war. They were making fuses and detonators.
So I ran a mortar squad. Maybe even made the fuses and detonators for me.
Well, we just might have. And I got a job at Sun Chief Electric. That was amazing because...
Doing what, making electrical components?
No, 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 no. We were making nylon for parachutes.
Whoa.
And we were the only factory in the whole country making threads that was honored to be part of the Army-Navy Excellence Award. I still remember the day at the factory when the officers all came and they collected us all around and they put the flag up, and every single person working that factory got an E for Excellence pin. It was a very
Wow.
proud moment.
Yeah, you should be proud.
Yeah, but aside from having to, work in that capacity, the other thing that was really hard at home was rationing. Everything you could think of was on the ration, be it clothes, shoes, gasoline, the food, all the basic food items. You had little ration coupons, and you had to try and figure out when was the best week to buy sugar and things like that. So a lot of us put in victory gardens, and it felt really good to be growing our own foods and taking care of ourselves so that we knew that what we weren't consuming here was going overseas to help all the soldiers.
Well, all I ever got was just a bunch of beans and ham pieces in a little can called sea rations.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
Let's
that.
call it high eating.
Well, sorry if it sounds like we were eating better here. I mean, it was hard.
I think you were.
We started raising chickens and rabbits, so we had plenty of protein to feed the family. And children got involved in scrap drives, because they could send the scraps off, scrap metal, and the government would use that to build airplanes and tanks. But I'll tell you something, I bet you didn't know that there was an Army post right here in Winstead.
No, I did not.
Yeah, well, there is.
Where?
Well, the Army looked all over the East Coast for good places to be spotting enemy aircraft. And
Enemy
they chose
aircraft. Oh,
they
wow.
chose our very own Soldiers Monument, and they built an observation post at the top of Soldiers Monument. And I got to be a member of the Observation Corps. We would go up in the tower in groups of 2, and we would look for the enemy aircraft.
Enemy aircraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you didn't see any either,
Oh.
because we shot them all down.
Well, you missed one. You missed one because one day we spotted a German bomber, and we had been trained to look for them.
German bomber.
And we spotted that bomber, and we called down to Granby, and they assured us that we had indeed seen a German bomber, but it was a bomber that we had captured and they were bringing home.
All right. I'll
So,
allow it.
You'll allow it?
I'll allow it.
Well, so that was something we did real special here in Winstead. So what can I say, soldier? Welcome home.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep, that sound you heard was the way our volunteer fire department knew where to show up for a fire. The Winstead Volunteer Fire Department was established in 1862, and the Winchester Center Volunteer Department began in 1948. Now, for major fires, they have worked together at the former Gilbert clock shop along the Still River. That fire was in March of 1975. And the Winstead Furniture Company building on Main Street was the former home of the Second Congregational Church, and that fire was in May of 1979. And of course, there were fire chiefs who led us and led each of the departments in many of those years. We had fire companies from different portions of the town. But let's not forget the police department. The police department has been in existence in our town since the 1800s and has protected and served us. Well, if you heard 5 of those horn blasts on a school day at 7:05 in the morning, you knew there was no school today. It was the one way we were able to tell everybody school was canceled, whether it was for snow or other reasons. And at 5 minutes past 7, if you heard that, you probably went back to sleep. And there was no school today. Our town has had parades almost since its very beginning. All kinds of parades. Early parades down Main Street. In 1936, the Winchester Rotary Club started the annual pet parade, and it has always been a show of resilience in our town. It never rained on a parade day. Up until last year, the parade was always held, and it never missed a parade day. The fire department parades and other celebrations have always been part of our town. Now, begun in 1932, the Laurel Festival and its parade have been ongoing celebrations in our town's nickname, the Laurel City. Now, except for years during World War II and breaks in the 1970s, the Laurel Parade has been a June tradition, along with the crowning of the Laurel Queen, and in 2016, the expanded crowning of the Laurel King. Now, perhaps you will recognize the names of a few of these Laurel Queens and Kings. And our population continued to grow. In the 15 years from 1935 to 1950, our town expanded its population by nearly 2,000. Over the years, our downtown Winstead has had many Mad River floods, but none so devastating as the one that occurred in 1955. There are many stories of the people who witnessed and survived the destruction of half of Main Street. But there is a very special story of one of those heroes during the flood that I would like to share with you tonight. This is the story of Daniel Smith, who saved the life of John Hort. Now, Dan was a minority student in the Gilbert School when he graduated in 1952. Now, Danny, as he was known to his friends, had just returned home in the summer of 1955 after a tour with the U.S. Army in Korea. On August 19th, he was on a hillside near St. Joseph Church, watching the fast-moving Mad River water race east along Main Street with building debris and logs, when he noticed John Hort trying to swim from the water to the shore. Dan, who was a strong swimmer and who served as a lifeguard during summer at local camps, he knew what to do. Throwing off his newly acquired prized wristwatch to the shore, Dan jumped into the water and reached John. From his Army training, Dan could see that John's eyes began to roll back and was about to go under just before he grabbed a hold of him. Together, They swirled in a whirlpool, losing touch with each other briefly, and then Dan was able to grab a hold of John again and hung on to him. Dan was nearly exhausted, struggling to make it to shore, when police officer Abe Risha came by in a small rescue boat just in the nick of time and helped John and Dan make it to land safely. Now, Dan remembers that when he got to shore after losing most of his clothes in the floodwaters, he recovered his prized wristwatch that someone was holding for him on the hillside, and then walked several blocks to his home. When he arrived there, the first thing his mother said was, "I thought you were dead." She had just had a visit from the civil defense agent who told her that they believed Dan had drowned. But others did lose their life. Alfred Umatz, Dan's best friend, often defended Danny when any racial issues came up at school. Now, Al told me that Danny, a wrestler, he didn't take any guff from anyone. He was strong, sharp-looking. He was a singer in the high school glee club. He was very personable and honest. And he was respected by nearly all who attended Gilbert, Alfred recalls. Danny often worked many hours after school each day for a local veterinarian, Raymond Church, and at Smitty's Chicken Farm on the New Hartford Road. Danny was so strong, Alfred remembers, that he could carry multiple bags of feed up to the second floor of the farmhouse building. That is, Al said, when he wasn't driving around in his Hudson. Now, Dan will be 90 in March. And after a distinguished career in the U.S. government service, he now lives with his wife at their home in Washington, D.C. area, where he is writing his memoirs, A Black Man's Journey in White America. In 2011, Dan was honored by the Gilbert School as a distinguished alumnus. But Winstead did recover, and Main Street's resiliency did come back. Throughout the town's history, there have been many changes in the town's governance. In the early founding, a 3-member board ran the town. Later, that board number was raised to 5 members, and as the town grew even more, it was decided that a 7-member board of selectmen, led by a strong mayor, would be the best form of governance for the town. Today, our town is governed by a 7-member board of selectmen, who from among their members choose a mayor, who is the chairman of the board of selectmen. The Board of Selectmen hires a professional town manager, who is the town's chief executive officer, and provides the daily staff management and leadership to the town employees. In 1947 through 1957, Peter Francis Hicks was elected mayor. And as the mayor when the flood hit in August 1955, Hicks was responsible for governing during the emergency and remained the elected mayor throughout the 1957 Reconstruction. Now, Hicks has a unique place in the town's history of government. Not only did he have one of the longest terms under the old form of elected mayor, but he was also elected as a member of the Board of Selectmen under the town manager form of government and chosen by that board as its mayor. Now, don't let this all confuse you. Here are some lists of the names of the former mayors and town managers. You may recognize many of these names, or maybe you're new here and you do not. But one thing is certain, the various government forms provided resiliency to our town.
School days, dear old golden road days.
Education has always been an important element of our town. William L. Gilbert, yeah, that major industrialist who you heard before, who contributed to improving our water resources, also left funds, as you know, for the Gilbert Home for children. But he also provided an endowment for building the town's high school. The first Gilbert school building was at the center of town across from the East End Park. The second high school, built with his endowment, is this building you are now in. Thought it'd be very interesting to hear from a student who attended both the old and the new school. I'd like to introduce to you Stephen Sedlak.
Thank you. Let me share some memories in a tale of two school buildings, so to speak. And we'll begin with the original Gilbert School on Park Place, which opened up in 1895. Now, as a freshman, I didn't know that the school that had served Winsted and its surrounding communities of Norfolk and Colebrook and Heartland was destined to close in 3 years. But I fully enjoyed my 3 years in the 60-year-old building and was challenged in my classes by some excellent teachers. One unique feature was the teaching of Latin, and one of the first things I learned to do was to conjugate verbs, such as amo, amas, amat. I love, you love, he, she, it loves. And when I learned that the word for farmer was agricola, I very cleverly made the connection to agriculture and could begin to see the relationship between Latin and English. Well, I took Algebra 1 followed by Algebra 2, and that was a bear. I remember being tutored the following summer because I got an incomplete, so I was glad to get Algebra 2 behind me. Science was followed by Biology 1 and Biology 2, and I do recall that the advanced sciences of physics and chemistry were limited as the rooms were designed more as lecture halls than as labs where students could get hands-on lab experiences. More on that later on. I was not yet interested in girls, so those 3 years allowed me to pursue my passion for sports. There were, of course, only 3 sports for boys: football, basketball, and baseball. No sports for girls. Following the school day, a walk was required to get to practice. The football and baseball fields were on a spot of land today that we know as Walker Field, and those fields were just reclaimed after the flood of a year earlier. The basketball court was at the YMCA, as the court at the school had a unique feature. The second level above the court was structured with a running track that circled the perimeter of the gym. If a basketball player chose to shoot from the corner, he ran the risk of the ball hitting the bottom of the track. In earlier years, when the court was used for competition, the opposing teams would change in a room next to the court, but the home team had to put on their uniforms down in the boiler room. The old school was limited as a building in other ways as well. There was not a cafeteria to serve hot lunches, so students had to bring their own bag lunches. There was a snack bar that was available, but the menu was the same every day: egg salad sandwiches and donuts and a carton of milk. I elected to buy Boston cream donuts every day, and I can imagine that helped me stay in shape for my sports. In the fall of 1958, Northwest Regional No. 7 High School opened, and the students from the surrounding communities housed at Gilbert, except for Heartland, now had a different school to attend. And in the following fall of 1959, this building opened. It was a great place to spend my senior year. It was immediately apparent why the new school was needed. Now there was a fully functioning gymnasium with adequate seating and a first-time opportunity for girls to participate in a sport with the founding of the gymnastics club. A fully functioning cafeteria program began, and I replaced the daily donuts with balanced meals, including Mrs. McKee's hot dinner rolls. In addition, I got a chance to work in the kitchen during my study hall, washing pots and pans, a skill that has come in handy over the years of my married life. The well-equipped science labs offered a real opportunity for hands-on learning. Chemistry students were required to identify the components of an unknown substance, and Doc Flaherty had created different unknowns for each of us. There were litmus tests and other tests to determine if the various chemicals were present in a process of elimination. Unfortunately, one enthusiastic student, I might add, poured his unknown into a hydrogen sulfide generator instead of correctly bubbling the hydrogen sulfide gas into his unknown. The result was the odor of rotten eggs wafting through the school right at lunchtime, which spoiled everyone's appetite on that particular day. I suppose there are many other memories to be shared, but those are some good ones from what I consider to be some of the best years of my life.
Thank you, Stephen, for sharing all of that memories with us. After the new Gilbert School was opened, a group of town residents, including Shafiq Nader and George Sherwood, worked together to open the state's first community college by converting the former Gilbert School on Main Street into a community college building. Now, Mr. Sherwood is with us here tonight to tell us something about the difficulties of beginning this major endeavor. And Mr. Sherwood, maybe he will tell us a little bit about the Lantern Museum that he started.
Good evening. My name is George Sherwood, as you now know. I came to Connecticut when the state hired me as an aeronautical engineer and a planner. I also proudly served in World War II. I was involved in the design of the Bradley Airport. I really love the history of this small town of Winsted. I made sure when I got here that I was active in as many groups as I could get into. I was on the board of zoning and appeals. I was a member of the Winchester Grange, the Volunteer Fire Department, the Masons, the Winchester Historical Society, and the Winchester Land Trust. So being active in the town helped me learn of another man of resilience, and that was Shafiq Nader. Shafiq and I became friends over the years, and his passion for starting a community college in this town rubbed off on everyone. He joined the Navy right out of high school to fight in World War II. When he got back from the war, he went to college. After college, he went to law school. In the middle of law school, in 1955, we had that terrible flood that we just learned of. The flood wiped out his father's restaurant, the Highland Arms, right in the center of town, and Shafiq left law school to come help his father rebuild and operate the the family restaurant. And that is where Shafiq and I met and became very good friends. When the Gilbert School moved from its previous location down by the East End Park to its new location, Shafiq saw that as an opportunity to get a community college here in town. So in 1961, he proposed the Winchester Bill, which would allow colleges to be run regionally by small towns combining forces, much like the regional high schools that we have now. Unfortunately, it was rejected by both the town and the state. Not to be slowed down, in 1963, Shafiq incorporated the Committee for the Community College of Northwest Connecticut. I was elected chairman of the committee, and Shafiq served as our president. That same year, the Higher Education Facilities Act came about to help between 25 and 30 community colleges be built each year. That got our committee going. We started polling the local high schools to find out the need for a community college in the area. We also constructed a plan ahead of time on opening and operating the college and devised a way to persuade the town's skeptics that it wouldn't draw in the hippies and the druggies and there'd be plenty of parking and plenty of housing for everyone. After the polls, we estimated that about 10% of the high school grads would attend college, which would then bring in about $100,000 of income for the school. Subtract salaries, books, furniture, school repairs, and the first year we'd be operating at about a $200,000 deficit. But NCCC was designed to be a school of the future. So in 1965, the committee made a deal with the town of Winchester to lease the old Gilbert School for a symbolic $1 a year with the town's approval. Well, the town approved 10-1. The school, though, needed to pick up the $270,000 property insurance on the school, on the building, with only $6,500 raised so far. I wanted private funding for the school all along, so the state would operate and take over the funding. Shafiq wanted public funding, but we just didn't have enough money. That in 1965, Bill number 4405 appropriated $458,000 for a new college in Winsted. The committee jumped right on this, and on June 21st, we moved and seconded a motion to request the state accept jurisdiction of the school at the earliest possible time, and the vote was unanimous. 4 days later, we sent a letter to the state asking for $250,000 in advance to rebuild the Gilbert School. Finally, on September 1st, the State Board for Regional Community Colleges announced our conditions to open. Our conditions were that the board had to acquire all assets and liabilities for the school. The school would have to be inspected. There'd have to be at least 50 full-time students enrolled. They'd have to improve all of the employees, and any expenditures over $500 by the committee would have to be approved by the state. We met all those conditions, and the Northwest Community College was opened on 9/27/1965. It was one of the first community colleges in Connecticut, and Shafiq Nader and the committee on a community college for Northwest Connecticut were the absolute definition of resilience. When I first moved to Winchester, the house I was in had no electricity. So what it did have was kerosene lamps. Kerosene lamps in the kitchen, kerosene lamps in the bedroom. Every room in the house had kerosene lamps, more than one. Some worked, some didn't, some were broken. This took me on a 40-year journey in collecting lamps. I got so many that I finally had to acquire another building to house them, and the building next door to me was available, and I grabbed it. It was the Bronson General Store, and it also had the post office in it. This also got my wife and I into the postmaster trade. My wife Ruth became the postmaster when we received the building, and she was there as postmaster until 1990 when she passed away. I took over as postmaster, and was there until 1997 when I finally retired. The other part of the building is where I housed all my kerosene lamps, and we opened the Winchester Center Kerosene Lamp Museum. We had over 500 lamps in the museum. They were all made between 1850 and 1879, and I collected them from all over, but mostly in the Naugatuck Valley. With Torrington and Waterbury being big brass towns, it would only make sense that there'd be plenty of brass kerosene lamps to be found. Some of the lamps in the museum were headlights on older automobiles, which I thought was fascinating. And some of them were housed in trains that made trips from Montreal to Boston. The folks in this town, as you've heard, have been through a lot. We've been through ups and downs, and we've come through it all with our resilience. We never give up, and we always stay the course.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much for sharing the story of the college as well as your unique collection of lanterns. Yes, the population of our town has risen and fallen over the years within its 250-year history, but it never exceeded 11,524, and that was reached in 1990. Now, we can boast that many great and noble people have lived here, but no one in the 1951 graduating class from Gilbert School had an inkling that one of their classmates would be a candidate for the President of the United States, not just once, but 4 times. Ralph Nader went from Gilbert to Princeton University, where he graduated in 1955 and received a law degree from Harvard University in 1958. He became a consultant to the United States Department of Labor in 1964, and in 1965, he published Unsafe at Any Speed. That book became a bestseller and led directly to the passage of the 1966 National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act, which gave government the power to enact safety standards for all automobiles sold in the United States. Now, he helped establish a number of consumer advocacy organizations, most notably Public Citizen. Nader and his associates, known as Nader's Raiders, radically transformed the meaning of consumer advocacy, focusing on fact-finding, research, analysis, and governmental lobbying. In addition to his run for president in 1996, 2000, 2004, and 2008, Nader has been a vocal critic of Microsoft, which he claimed was a monopoly, and more recently of Boeing for its lack of oversight in jet manufacturing. In 2014, he launched the Ralph Nader Radio Hour, a weekly news and interview show. The following year, he realized a lifelong dream: the opening in our downtown of the American Museum of Tort Law, the first law museum in the United States, and in fact, the only museum in the world focusing on law. Nader also began the Center for Study of Responsive Law, a nonprofit organization that supports and conducts a wide variety of research and educational projects to encourage the political, economic, and social institutions of this country to be more aware of the needs of the citizen consumer. At age 87, Ralph Nader continues to show the resiliency so characteristic of our town. And now, here to share with us some personal thoughts about resiliency and our town is Ralph Nader.
Colleagues, for creating this wonderful. Thank you, Jack, and your colleagues for creating this wonderful event on the occasion of the 250th anniversary of the town of Winchester. Imagine, it started before the American Revolution in 1771. It's an area about the size of Manhattan Island in New York City, full of woodlands, fields, lakes, two major rivers, streams, a wonderful place for children to grow up. Only 11,000 people, quite different from Manhattan's population. And in its history, the town of Winchester, known as Winstead, has experienced wars and depressions, epidemics and floods and other major storms. And it still has been resilient. At times it reached peaks of crisis. Around 1900, the town reached 9,000 people. It had 100 factories and fabrication shops, and it had needs that weren't being met. And so philanthropists started. They helped build all kinds of institutions. The hospital was built, first one in Litchfield County. The story of the Winstead Health Center is in this book, Code Blue. It's in the library. The story of the community college, Democratizing America, it's in the library. And don't forget this, the promise of a small town. It'll all make you proud. Philanthropists, Beardsley Memorial Library, philanthropists. The town needs a high school. William Gilbert, the industrialist, funds the high school. That's resilience. There was another crisis period, starting in the late 1950s for the following 20 years. The factories started shutting down with all the job loss. We lost our train station, and at one time 7 trains a day to New York City. Imagine that. We lost our county courthouse. The daily newspaper, Winstead Evening Citizen, shut down. The Great Flood of 1955 devastated Main Street. And then resilience of the community came in again. Our family was proud to play a part in that. My brother Schaff and a number of his enthusiastic fellow townspeople created the Northwest Community College, which is now very highly rated in the country. My sister Claire, with community lawyer Charlene LaVoy and the wisdom and advice of Dr. Fred Hyde, established the Winstead Health Center when the county hospital shut down. And against all outside advice, I located the only law museum in the country, the American Museum of Tort Law, in my hometown on Main Street. Other citizens established the Winchester Land Trust. Others led the fight to repair the town. We also have the American Mural Project, which has the largest murals of working Americans in history of any mural project in the world, towering, and here in Winstead for you to go see. The selectmen and the town manager, Bob Geiger, stabilized the finances of the town. And the Beardsley Memorial Library has marvelously expanded in its services and events. Again, resilience. What about the future? I suggest that citizens fill the auditorium at Gilbert to think about the future of Winstead and its 5 adjoining towns. In 1989, we put out a book called The Promise of a Small Town, and it has a lot of information that can be used today. Indeed, there are so many things, short range and long range, that can improve this whole area. We need a weekly town newspaper, for example. We can expand the community college to provide majors that will attract students from all over the country. We can establish civic skill courses teaching youngsters how to practice democracy in our high school and community college. We can experiment with municipal broadband, which some towns have done. We can help expand the startup of the food co-op in this town, which is really needed, as Great Barrington has had for years. We can open a bookstore for author events from the region and around the country to provide a vibrant intellectual life, which is so essential in a democracy. We can do these and a lot of other things if we just come together, if we just show up. Half of democracy is showing up. And we have a lot of talent here in Winstead and in the adjoining towns that I think can be encouraged to have a higher estimate of their own significance in building a much better community, a community that will be a model in many ways for the rest of the country. We need more clean economic activity to provide more local economic jobs here, as Winstead was once very self-reliant in all kinds of ways. And we need a more vibrant level of civic activity. That's really the most fundamental of all. People have to show up for gatherings, meetings. More people have to vote. More people's ideas need to be encouraged to be put forward. And with all of this, we have this wonderful town meeting form of government, probably the most democratic institution in the world, where people are their own legislature if they don't like what the elected representatives are doing. And that's why I've always said, if you don't like what your local government is doing, look at yourself in the mirror, Winsteadites, because you've got the legislative power to turn it around. So let's use all our assets, put them together, have a big gathering at the auditorium at Gilbert, and get underway. We have nothing to lose but our dreams.
This resiliency of our town over the last 250 years is a legacy built upon adventurers who first settled here, entrepreneurs who built businesses, philanthropists who donated to the town, and volunteers who have run the fire department, civic organizations, government boards, and commissions.
Would all of you who are born after the year 2000 please stand up?
There's a few, okay. Well, stay standing.
Our future is in your hands.
Would all of those in the audience who were born after 1980 stand up and remain standing with the others? The legacy of our town is now in your hands also.
The resiliency The resiliency of our towns is now in your hands.